Morning I found out my husband had been promoted to regional director, a $185,000 salary with a performance bonus structure that could push it close to $230,000. I was standing at the kitchen sink in my bathrobe, rinsing out my coffee mug before my 7 a.m. client call. He walked in holding his phone like it was a trophy. "They approved it," he said. "Everything. The title, the comp package, all of it." I set down the mug. I turned around, and I smiled the biggest, most genuine smile I'd felt in months, because I knew what that number meant. I knew how hard he'd worked. I knew the late nights and the Sunday calls and the dinners with clients he didn't even like. I hugged him. I told him I was proud of him. I meant it. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have predicted standing there in my bathrobe with wet hands, was that 6 weeks later, I would be sitting at our kitchen table with a legal pad, a calculator, and 4 years of receipts, calculating exactly how much it had cost me to be his wife. My name is Brooke. I'm 31 years old. I have a master's degree in communications, a freelance consulting practice I built from nothing, and a very specific way of organizing my email that my best friend Tamsin says is a little unhinged, but also deeply impressive. I met my husband. I'll call him my husband because that's what he was. Even at the end, at a work conference in Austin when I was 26. His name is Wade. He was funny and sharp, and he remembered small things, which felt rare. He remembered that I took my coffee with oat milk before I'd mentioned it twice. He remembered that my sister's name was Lily and that she lived in Portland and that I worried about her more than I let on. We dated for 2 years. We got engaged. We got married in October in the backyard of his parents' property in Connecticut, with oak leaves on the ground and his mother crying at the altar in the good way. I thought we wanted the same things. We didn't combine finances. That was Wade's idea, and at the time I agreed with it the way you agree with something that sounds modern and healthy and self-sufficient. We each kept our own accounts. We had a joint account for household expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, the streaming services, and we each contributed equally to it every month. Equal, that word. What equal meant in practice, Wade made 3 times what I made, especially in those early years when my consulting practice was still finding its footing. What equal meant in practice, I covered half the mortgage on a house we bought based on his income expectations, not mine. What equal meant in practice, when his company had a holiday party and needed catering, he'd ask me to coordinate it because I had a talent for that sort of thing. And I did it, unpaid, on a Tuesday afternoon when I should have been working on a client proposal. I want to be clear, I didn't walk around feeling victimized. That's not how this works. You don't feel victimized. You feel like a partner. You feel like you're building something. You feel like the sacrifices are temporary, and the equity is coming, and the person next to you sees what you're contributing even when it doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. Spoiler, it wasn't coming. And he didn't see it. The Christmas party was Wade's idea. His entire family, his parents, his 2 brothers and their wives, his grandmother, 3 nieces and nephews, and his cousin, Francesca, who I had met exactly twice, were all coming to our house in Raleigh for 4 days over Christmas. It would be the first time we were hosting. Wade was excited in the way he got excited about things that didn't require him to plan anything. "It'll be great," he said. "We can do a big Christmas Eve dinner, the whole thing." I asked what the whole thing meant. He said prime rib, mashed potatoes, green beans, his grandmother's recipe for sweet potato casserole, a cheese board, a dessert spread. For 11 adults and 3 children. I asked who was handling what. He said we'd split it, 50-50, down the middle. I looked at him. I said, "We have 11 adults and 3 kids coming to stay in our house for 4 days. He said, "Right, so we split everything." I said, "Wade, I run the household. I coordinate the scheduling. I do the shopping, I manage the grocery list, I know where the extra blankets are, I know that your grandmother is lactose intolerant and your brother Tyler is doing low carb right now. That's not 50% of the work, that's 100% of the logistics." He was quiet for a moment, then he said, and I want to remember this exactly as he said it, "Brooke, I work 60 hours a week. I can't also be the one managing every single detail. That's why we're a team." I nodded. I said okay, but something shifted, something very small, very quiet, like a key turning in a lock somewhere deep in my chest. I called Tamsin that night. Tamsin has been my best friend since sophomore year of college, and she has the rare gift of listening to everything you say and then saying the exact thing you needed to hear but didn't know yet. I told her about the Christmas dinner. I told her about the 50-50 split. I told her about that's why we're a team. Tamsin was quiet for a second. Then she said, "What would 50-50 actually look like?" I didn't understand the question. She said, like if you actually split it. Exactly down the middle. What would that mean? I thought about it. She said, he wants 50%, give him 50%. You shop for your half. He shops for his half. You cook your dishes, he cooks his. You set up your side of the guest rooms, he sets up his. I said that was insane. She said, is it? I didn't decide anything that night. I went to bed and I lay there listening to Wade breathe. And I thought about 4 years of grocery runs and vendor calls and birthday cards sent to his family members on his behalf, and the time I drove 40 minutes to pick up his dry cleaning because he had a presentation and I worked from home anyway. I thought about the $185,000 salary, the bonus structure, the performance incentive that could push his total compensation to nearly $250,000 a year. I thought about the joint account we both contributed to equally. $600 a month each. I did the math in my head. $600 was roughly 7% of my monthly income after taxes. $600 was roughly 3% of his. Equal. I got up at 2 a.m. and opened my laptop. I started a new spreadsheet. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something I had never done before in 4 years of marriage. I tracked everything, every task, every hour, every dollar. I found a website that listed average hourly rates for household services in North Carolina. Housekeeping, $19.28 to $28 per hour. Personal chef, full, $35 to $25 per hour. Event coordination, $45 to $85 per hour. Household management's that personal assistant, $25 to $45 per hour. I was conservative. I used the low end of every range. Grocery shopping and meal planning for the week, 3 hours, $25, $85. Cleaning before guests arrived, 6 hours over 2 days, $19 each. Christmas Eve dinner coordination, shopping, prep, cooking, and serving, 11 hours, $35 each. Managing the guest room logistics, extra linens, toiletries, dietary accommodations, 2 hours, $25 HR. The holiday cards Wade's family received from Wade and Brooke that I wrote, addressed, and mailed, 1.5 hours, 25 hours, 2000 That was just Christmas. I went back further. I built out 12 months, then 24, then 48. By the time I was done, I was sitting at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night with a number on my screen that made me feel something I didn't have a word for. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Something colder than both. $94,000. That's what I'd contributed to our household, in labor, in coordination, in the invisible architecture of our daily life. Over 4 years, at the lowest possible market rate that had never appeared in any account, any budget, any conversation. He had a $185,000 salary, and I had a $94,000 debt that no one had ever acknowledged. Christmas Eve arrived the way holidays do when you're hosting, in a blur of activity that starts 3 days early and doesn't fully stop until everyone is gone. Wade's parents arrived first, then his brother Tyler and his wife Simone with their 2 kids, then his brother Grant and his fiancée, then his grandmother in the passenger seat of Francesca's car. I had prepared my half of the dinner, exactly my half. My dishes, the green beans, a winter salad, a cranberry sauce made from scratch, and a cheesecake for dessert. All of it beautifully done. All of it readifully done. All of it readifully. Wade's dishes, prime rib, mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole from his grandmother's recipe. Wade had not started any of them. He'd been showing his brothers around the house, opening beers, laughing about something that happened at the office. When I went to find him at 4 in the afternoon, the prime rib was still in its packaging in the refrigerator. I told him very quietly that if he wanted it on the table by 7, he needed to start now. He looked at the refrigerator. He looked at me. He said, "Can't you just?" "No," I said. "That's your half." There's a specific kind of silence that falls in a room when the temperature drops by 10 degrees all at once. That's what happened. He started cooking. His mother offered to help. His grandmother hovered. By 7:30, there was prime rib on the table, slightly overcooked, and mashed potatoes that were grainy in the way that mashed potatoes get when someone adds the butter at the wrong time. Nobody said anything directly to me, but I could feel the temperature of the room, the glances between his mother and Simone, the way Grant's fiancée tilted her head when she looked at my side of the table, perfect, and then Wade's, struggling. His grandmother ate the green beans and told me they were wonderful. I thanked her. I meant it. Wade said nothing through dinner. The real conversation happened on December 26th, after everyone had gone home and we were standing in the kitchen surrounded by the debris of a 4-day holiday. He said, "That was embarrassing." I said, "Which part?" He said, "You know which part. You let me flounder in front of my whole family." I said, "I did my half." He said, "We're a team, Brooke. You don't just do your half and watch me drown." I went to the table. I opened my laptop. I turned the screen around. He looked at the spreadsheet. He didn't say anything for a long moment. I said, "This is 4 years of household labor at market rate, conservative market rate. This is grocery management and event coordination and cleaning and scheduling and every favor I've done for your career that doesn't have a job title. This is $94,000. He said, "That's not, you can't put a dollar value on." "You did," I said. "Every time you said 50-50 and handed me the task list, you put a dollar value on it. You just made sure it was 0. I don't want to turn this into a legal summary because this isn't about the legal part. But I'll say this. We went to a mediator in February. We had a real estate attorney and a financial consultant. We separated our assets, we divided the equity in the house, and we negotiated a settlement that accounted, finally, for contribution to the marital household." The spreadsheet came with me to every meeting. Wade's attorney called it speculative. My attorney called it documented and reasonable. The mediator said she'd seen worse and better and suggested we find a number that reflected reality. We found a number. I'm not going to say what it was, but it was more than 0, and it was more than half of the savings account, and when I saw it on paper, I thought, someone finally did the math. My consulting practice is doing well. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Cary with good light and a kitchen I've completely made my own. Tamsin came to visit in March, and we cooked dinner together. Just the 2 of us, a whole roasted chicken and a bottle of Côtes du Rhône. And she looked around the apartment and said, "This feels like you." It does. I still do Christmas. Last year I hosted my sister Lily, who came down from Portland with her girlfriend, and my parents, and a college friend named Ren who had nowhere to go. We did prime rib. We did mashed potatoes. We did sweet potato casserole with the good marshmallows on top. I made everything, every single dish, because I wanted to. Because it was mine to give. Because there is a complete difference between choosing to give something and being expected to provide it for free forever. And I think the first 3 decades of most women's lives are spent learning that difference in the hardest possible way. I learned it standing at a kitchen table with a laptop and 4 years of receipts at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. I learned it in a spreadsheet. And I'll tell you something, I've never made better mashed potatoes in my life. I've thought a lot about the word equal since all of this happened. It's a word that sounds so clean, so fair, so reasonable. And I think that's exactly why it was so easy to let it hollow me out for 4 years without noticing. Wade never thought of himself as someone who was taking advantage of me. I genuinely believe that. He thought we had a system. He thought 50-50 was the most respectful arrangement 2 independent people could have. What he never stopped to ask, what I never stopped to ask, and that's on me too, was whether the system was measuring the right things. Equal contributions to a joint account, equal dollar amounts, but not equal hours, not equal access, not equal sacrifice. That's the thing about a blind spot. It doesn't feel like a blind spot from the inside. It just feels like normal. I chose to build my consulting practice slowly, taking smaller clients so I'd have flexibility to handle the household. I told myself that was my preference. Maybe it was. But it was also shaped by the fact that someone had to coordinate the grocery orders and schedule the HVAC service, and remember that Wade's mother needed to know our plans 2 weeks in advance or she'd spiral. That someone was always me. And because it was always me, and because I'd agreed to split the bills down the middle, I had quietly arranged my entire professional life around an unpaid second job that didn't have a title. The intelligence I needed wasn't in a book. It was in that spreadsheet. It was in the discipline to stop and actually look at the numbers, not just the ones in the joint account, but all of them. The hours, the market rates, the 4 years of labor that had been invisible because I'd never made it visible, tracing it all out on a legal pad at 11 o'clock at night. I understood something I hadn't been able to articulate before. You can only make fair decisions about things you're willing to see clearly. Wade and I had both chosen, in different ways and for different reasons, not to see clearly. That choice had consequences. That's not fate, that's just cause and effect, playing out the way it always does. The grit, and I don't use that word lightly, wasn't in standing my ground at the Christmas dinner, or sitting across from a mediator, or watching his attorney call my spreadsheet speculative. The grit was in the years before that, in building something of my own even when the structure of our marriage made it harder, in not walking away from my consulting practice when it would have been easier to let it go. That foundation, the thing I'd quietly built while also running our household, was what gave me somewhere to land when everything else came apart. I don't think I'm a cautionary tale. I think I'm just a person who took a long time to do one specific kind of math. And once I did it, I couldn't undo it. Once you see what your time is worth, you can't go back to giving it away for free. Tamsin asked me once, after everything was finalized, whether I was angry. I sat with that for a minute. I told her not anymore. I'd been angry. But anger is just what grief looks like before it finds its shape. What I had now was something more useful: clarity, standards, and a kitchen that is entirely, completely mine.